Good morning or good afternoon, everyone who has joined our lecture today. My name is Tatьяна Щербакова, and today I'm going to speak about a great English playwright, William Shakespeare. So we will speak about not only about Shakespeare himself, but about his time, the views and the tastes of his contemporaries, and of course about his plays. So we will begin with looking at the state of London theatres of that time, so the context in which Shakespeare worked. Then I'll touch some points of acting and writing for Shakespeare himself, and at the end we will take a closer look at some plays and consider the concept of the play within the play in Shakespeare's works. So let's start. We know for sure that somewhere late in 1580s, Shakespeare appeared in London and found a job in the theatrical profession. So before speaking about his plays, let's take a brief look at the state of the theatres of that time. The first permanent building for the theatre was built by James Burbage for his company, whose name was the Lord Chamberlain's Men, and Shakespeare belonged to this troupe. And this theatre was called quite simply just the theatre. Burbage would go on to become Shakespeare's closest friend and the man for whom Shakespeare wrote his greatest parts. So here in the portrait we can see James Burbage, and this is the original Hamlet and the original King Lear and the original Romeo. The company had 10 players, 10 hirelings, various musicians, stagehands, the fee gatherers, and boys in training. A few years later, Burbage lost his lease on the theatre site and began a construction of a new, bigger playhouse, which was called the Globe, and it was situated on the south, just south of the Thames. To pay for it, he shared the lease with the 5 partners in the company, including Shakespeare. The Globe Theatre opened in 1599, probably with a performance of Julius Caesar. It was full to its capacity, around 2,000 people, and the play was a great success. In 1613, the Globe burned to the ground when the roof caught fire during the play of Henry VIII. But very quickly, in a year, a new building, a new Globe, was built not far from the original site. In 1917, American actor and director Sam Wanamaker founded the Shakespeare Globe Trust and the International Shakespeare Globe Center, with the objective of building a faithful recreation of Shakespeare's Globe close to its original location. So it was quite successful, and the theatre opened in 1997 under the name Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. It is located on Bankside, about 230 meters from the original site. Performances in the modern Globe, and you can see the building on the down slides, on the down photos. So performances in the modern Globe are engineered to duplicate the original environment of Shakespeare's Globe. So there are no spotlights, there is an open stage, and the plays are performed during the daylight and in the evenings. So there are no microphones, speakers, microphones or speakers, only the natural voices of the actors, and all music is performed live, most often on period instruments, and the actors and the audience could see and interact easily with each other as if it were in Shakespeare times. So some more details of London theatres. Usually the performances started at about 2 p.m. and there were reasons for that. First, there was no electricity in those days, so there were no effective and safe ways to light the stage enough to do the performance at night. Torches and lanterns were too dangerous in a wooden structure where floor was covered with straw. We know that the city of London burned twice to the ground, and fire was an ever-present fear of that period. Another reason to go to the theatre in the daytime would be the fact that walking around at night, especially for women, was not safe. London had no police force at that time, and the nightmare and at night time streets belonged to the criminals. So the average play lasted for 3 hours, and the company gave performances every afternoon except Sunday. Theatres were also closed during Lent. They were closed during plague epidemics, and the companies survived by going on tours in the countryside. And we can suppose that it was the first experience when Shakespeare got acquainted with the theatre, when one of such touring groups came to his native Stratford-upon-Avon, and he was impressed by the performance and decided to devote his life to the theatre. Shakespeare's company was the most successful of those days, and his plays filled the theatres. In fact, it was a fascinating time. The professional entertainment industry was just taking off for the first time, but the city of London of that period was strongly dominated by the Puritans, and Puritans, as we know, didn't like theatre. They didn't allow the presence of fixed theatres in the heart of the city, on the northern bank of the Thames. So they pushed the theatres out into the suburbs on the south bank of the River Thames. So we know very well that the Thames dominates London, and in Shakespeare's days there was only one bridge across the Thames, and in order to get to the other bank, to go to the theatre, you had either to take a boat, to rent a boat and pay for that, or to walk across this bridge. And here in this picture, so I'm sorry, the picture is not very vivid and not very good, but we can see the Thames and the bridge over it. As you see, in those times, there were some constructions on the bridge. But most interestingly, that at the south end of London Bridge, on the gatehouse up to the poles, there hung the severed heads of traitors. They were there as a reminder to the people of London to remain obedient to Queen and Parliament. So, and imagine, well, a London dweller was going to see a theatrical performance, and he was going across this bridge, and at the end of the bridge he saw the heads of the traitors who had been executed for their crimes. And it's amazing to think that all people who walked across London Bridge and to see a play about a king or a queen who were dethroned or a play about rioting crowds, they had actually to pass through the gatehouse where they could see these executed traitors, the real figures who had engaged in the same kind of activity. So the theater was the place where the big political and social issues of the day were explored, and it was highly dangerous. For that reason, all plays had to be read by the office of the Lord Chamberlain, who was the official of the court in charge of public entertainment and royal entertainment. So because the other aspect of the theater of that time was in the fact that the acting companies did not only make their money at the box office, they also made them from performances at the royal court. So every theatrical company had to have plays which would suit ordinary people of the city and the royal court. So people went over London Bridge, and there were the playhouses. So what was the interior like? And we've got some evidence. So first, we got evidence from the building contracts, which give us an idea of the dimensions, but there is only one drawing of the interior of the Elizabethan theatre. So you can see it on this, in this picture. So it's a drawing of a theatre called the Swan. What happened? A visiting Dutchman sent a letter to a friend back in Holland describing the theatre with a drawing, and then his friend copied it, and today this copy is kept in Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. We know from other drawings that this person was not very good at perspective, so some of the dimensions and details are not quite right in this picture, but certainly we have a general idea of the shape of the theatre. When Shakespeare's Globe Theatre was being reconstructed for the new Globe on Bankside, this drawing was very much the model that was used. So what we see? We see a large area in the foreground, which was known as the yard or the pit. It was the place where people stood. They paid a penny and stood quite close to the stage. They were actually known as Groundlings, and Hamlet refers to them as gentlemen of the ground. A groundling was in fact a type of a small fish that would rise up to the surface and open its mouth. And that suggests the idea of the groundlings, the people who have paid a penny, standing gaping, open-mouthed, up at the wonders of the world they were seeing on the stage. The stage then was quite high, with the people standing around it. So in the picture we can see that people could surround this platform on three sides. But if you had a little bit more money, if you were a little bit more upper class, you could pay for a seat and a cushion, and importantly, given what the British weather is like, you could be covered. So one can see around the edges of the drawing 3 layers of the gallery, which was the more expensive, and it was the seated part of the audience. And of course, upper class used these galleries. Half of the stage is covered by a canopy. And that canopy would have been beautifully decorated with the signs of the zodiac. At the back of the stage, there are a couple of doors. And we know from the stage directions in many of Shakespeare's plays that he often used the device of having different people coming at the opposite doors, either side of the stage. And so you can get a very good sense of opposite forces, maybe two different armies, one coming through each door. Above, there is a raised area. And sometimes it was used for scenes where people would speak at a window. And of course, the most famous example is the scene in Romeo and Juliet, where Juliet is at her window and Romeo is under the window in the orchard below. So we sometimes think of that as Juliet's balcony, but actually Shakespeare nowhere in this play refers to a balcony. A balcony was introduced later, in about 150 years later, in the 18th century, but originally it was a window. In Shakespeare's theater, at least, it was a window. At the very top, there is a flag. This theater was the Swan, so it got a picture of a swan on the flag. Besides, you can see a herald there with a trumpet, and when the play was about to begin, the trumpet would be sounded 3 times, so people could come in from the streets and witness the beginning of the play. Although the dimensions may be slightly questionable, the thing that the Swan drawing crucially shows us is that this is an open stage. It's a flat platform. There is no proscenium arch. It's not like those later theaters of the 18th, 19th, or 20th century theaters, where there is an archway and a curtain, where the world of the play and the world of actors is divided from the world of the audience. Here it is one room, outdoor theater, a place where the actors and the audience share the same place. When an actor on the Shakespearean stage is alone, we say he or she is speaking a monologue, voicing his or her thoughts, speaking to himself. But they are not only speaking to themselves, they are also speaking to the audience, because they are very close to the audience, and the audience practically participate in the play. There is an openness, and the audience are looking from different angles. The theater is in the round. There is no single perspective. There is multiplicity of angles, a multiplicity of voices, and a multiplicity of characters from different social classes. The stage was completely flexible. The empty space that was extended out into the audience and could be viewed from 3 sides could be a small prison cell, a battlefield, a royal court, a crowded city street, an ocean, and any other place in rapid succession without changing a thing. The playwright wrote in a way that encouraged the audience to imagine the sets. So the sets, there were no sets as we know them today. It was occasionally necessary to have a piece of furniture in a scene. For example, the bed for Desdemona in Othello. In that case, the bed would be on the rear stage, concealed by a curtain until the time came to act out the scene. So this was the context in which Shakespeare worked. Now some words about his own experience as an actor and as a playwright. By the early 1590s, we know for sure that Shakespeare has become an actor. He is not known to have acted after 1603, and tradition gives him only secondary parts, such as the ghost in Hamlet, for example, or Adam in As You Like It. He was much more successful as a playwright. When writing his plays, Shakespeare had to take into account two audiences, those in the gallery seats and those in the pit. Those in the galleries were somewhat educated and interested in the ideas he was exploring. They were able to appreciate subtle humor and character development, but those in the pit would need action, sex, and slapstick. So when you read Shakespeare's plays, you notice that after each monologue or some quiet scene where the focus is on conversation, there will be a scene in which there is violence or comedy. Today, if you go to a Saturday matinee in the theater, the teens in the audience get restless if there is no action. They talk, they get up and walk, they play their mobile phones, they need some action, so they hoot if the hero kisses the heroine. And this is a mild version of what was happening in Shakespeare's theater, in the pit. The pit, they were demanding. They might have been able to appreciate the subtleness of Hamlet's monologue, but they wanted a sword fight or a good bloody murder. And if too much time went by without one, they would amuse themselves by booting and jeering the people on stage or throwing rotten fruit on them. Thus, keeping the pit happy was one of Shakespeare's tasks and one of any playwright's major concerns. So Shakespeare knew, whenever he was writing, that he had to keep in mind different sorts of audience. And that's one of the reasons why Shakespeare's plays have the extraordinary mixture of high-class characters and low. And a great example of this is A Midsummer Night's Dream. In general, a really good technique of beginning to think about any Shakespeare's play is just to look at the list of the character at the front of it and think about how you would divide them into groups. So if we look at the list of characters of this play, we will immediately see that we get the Duke and his queen, so this is the royal court. Then we get well-to-do characters, the gentry, as we might say, Demetrius, Lysander, and lovers. Then you get so-called rude mechanicals, the working man who put on the play. There must be a bit of a joke on behalf of Shakespeare's acting company because, of course, they regarded themselves as inferior characters in London society, and they lived and they worked on the other bank of the Thames, opposite the city, so to say. Working men, not upper class at all, and yet, through the theater, they got the opportunity to impersonate the kings and the upper classes. They could put on the robes of kings and queens and dukes. And in this play there is one more group of characters, fairy creatures. So, and all of them meet in a wood near Athens, where the action takes place. Well, a bit later we will remember. I will remind you the plot of the play. So how the play went on. At that time, there was little time for rehearsals, and actors were given the words of only their own parts. So the crucial scenes in Shakespeare's plays are between 2 or 3 people only. And they are played with one, or they are played with one character dominating the stage, a crowded stage. Most female parts were written for young male actors or boys, so Shakespeare didn't often write big roles for them or didn't keep them actively on stage for lengthy periods. In addition, it was common for one actor to perform several parts, several minor roles. And again, making his plays, Shakespeare had to take that into account and make sure that he didn't have two characters on the stage who were being played by the same actor. And he had to make sure that there was enough time for one person to change his costume, so he couldn't have an actor leave the stage dressed as a serving man and return seconds later as a soldier. So Shakespeare knew the theater from inside, and his continuous association with the company must have given him direct working knowledge of all aspects of the theater. Numerous pages in his plays show conscious concern for theater arts and audience reactions. So now let's look at some of his plays and his remarks. Scholars have determined something of how Shakespearean theater looked like, and while the historians continue their research, the best general sense of Shakespeare in his theater still comes from his plays. In his first comedy, Two Gentlemen of Verona, Shakespeare had one of his female characters cross-dress as a man. A comic device, to be sure, but also a kind of a commentary on the artificiality of the performance itself, an acknowledgement that the audience knows it's a boy playing a woman playing a man, and that the character pretending to be something else, she is not, is a reflection of the boy actor pretending to be something he is not. In Richard II, Richard is compared to his predecessor and found wanting, like an old actor left on stage once the well-graced star has exited. In Henry VIII, in the first part of Henry VIII, the fourth, Falstaff offers to have a play extempore in which they can role play and rehearse how the young prince would talk to his father. In the third part of Henry VI, the future Richard III speaks about how, like an actor, he can wet his cheeks with artificial tears and frame his face to all occasions. So he pretends to be an actor. In the opening stage of Richard III, Richard breaks down his appearance almost as if he is a casting director, what roles he must be right for. Since he is rudely stamped, deformed, unfinished, and not shaped for sportive tricks, he concludes that since he cannot prove a lover, he is determined to prove a villain. And he even coaches his accomplice Buckingham in terms of a director might use. He says, "Canst thou quake and change thy color, murder thy breath in middle of a word, and then again begin, and stop again, as if thou were distraught and mad with terror?" And Buckingham reassures Richard, "I can counterfeit the deep tragedian." So from this short list we see that Shakespeare's histories are filled with references to and applications of the actor's art, most certainly drawn from playwright's early beginnings as an actor. In several of his works, Shakespeare used the concept of a play within a play, including The Midsummer Night's Dream, The Taming of the Shrew, Love's Labour's Lost, and most importantly in Hamlet. It is important to note that it was not Shakespeare himself who invented this trick, this technique. Scholars argue that Thomas Kyd was the first to use this device in his play entitled The Spanish Tragedy in 1587. The internal play appears especially frequently in his early plays, and Midsummer Night's Dream is one of them. So I have just mentioned it, the list of characters of this play. So let's remember the plot briefly. Theseus, the Duke of Athens, is going to marry Hippolyta, the Queen of Amazon. And on the eve of their wedding, 4 lovers run away to the forest near Athens. Because they didn't want to obey their parents' directions. So Puck, a fairy, makes both of the boys fall in love with the same girl, and plays different tricks on them. But everything finishes successfully. There are some quarrels, some fightings, some misunderstanding, but everything finishes all right. At the same time, some working men, some artisans are rehearsing a play about the tragic love story of Pyramus and Thisbe to present this play at the wedding for Theseus and Hippolyta on the wedding day. So fairy Puck also plays tricks on them. He looks at their rehearsals in the wood, and he plays a trick on them by giving one of the actors an ass's head, which frightens the others away. At the same time, Puck helps his master Oberon to play a trick on a fairy queen, and she falls in love with this bottom who has the head of the ass. But in the end, Puck reverses his magic, the conflict is resolved, and the two couples reconcile and marry. So every happy end. So the play is full of ideas about love, friendship, relations between parents and children, supernatural forces, irrational feelings and behavior. But today, now, we are interested in this little presentation of the theater. So how these artisans imagine the theater, the work of the theater. So, and you can see some words from this play. So Nick Bottom, he is the weaver. He is, the most passionate theater lover, and he is ready to perform any part in the play. In the second scene of the first act, in Quincy's house, where they decide on the parts they are going to play, so Quince says that they are thought to fit through all Athens to play in the interlude. So, and Nick Bottom is ready to play all the parts, and he is sure he can do it perfectly well. But how is he going to do it? Let's look at the description. That will ask some tears in the true performing of it. If I do it, I will move storms. I may hide my face, let me play Thisbe too. I'll speak in a monotonous little voice. Thisne, Thisne, oh, Pyramus, lover, dear. Thisbe dear and lady dear. Let me play the lion too. I will roar, that I will do any man's heart good to hear me. I will roar, that I will make the duke say, let him roar again, let him roar again. But his companions are afraid that it can frighten the ladies, and they would shriek, and it would be enough to hang or to punish the actors. So Nick Bottom is ready to adjust to any situation, and he will just change his boots immediately. But I will aggravate my voice so that I will roar you as gently as any suckling dove. I will roar you at where any nightingale. So we see the actors. Well, the actors are very far from professional actors, and they have only vague impression of acting. Another citation from this play, the first scene of the third act, we see the rehearsal itself, and we learn something more about the theatrical art of that period. They want to leave out the sword and the killing. And again, resourceful Nick Bottom has an excellent idea. I have a device to make all well. Write me a prologue, and let the prologue seem to say we will do no harm with our swords, and that Pyramus is not killed indeed. And for the more better assurance, tell them that I am Pyramus, am not Pyramus, but Bottom the weaver. This will put them out of fear. So Nick is afraid that the audience doesn't have any imagination, and they will take everything for true, and the prologue can help them. So Bottom Companies is literal-minded, that required that the moon actually shine, that the wall through which Pyramus and Thisbe speak be solidly there, and that the actor who plays the lion assure the ladies in the audience that he is only a make-believe lion. So the literalness which lies behind such a materialistic conception of theater is opposite to what to Shakespeare poetic drama, to what he created, to that illusion with words, rich costumes, and very few props. So now we will see a video fragment of this play. Well, and this is a video fragment from Midsummer Night's Dream, staged in Modern Globe Theatre. So, and I recommend you not only enjoy the performance itself, but pay attention to the arrangement of the theatre. You will see how close the audience is to the actors, and that they communicate directly with each other. So please, video.
Gentles, perchance you wonder at this show, but wonder on till truth makes all things plain. This man is Pyramus, if you will know. This beauteous lady, Thisbe is certain. Pyramus, move. Oh my God! This man with lime and rough cast doth present wall, that vile wall which did these lovers sunder. And through wall's chink, poor souls, they are content to whisper. Oh God! Keep going, keep. At the which, let no man wonder. This man with lantern, dog, and bush of thorn presenteth moonshine. For you will know by moonshine did these lovers think no scorn to meet at 9 us 2. There, to woo. Go, let's go. Lift your head. This grisly beast, which Lionheart by name, the trusty Thisbe, coming first by night, did scare away. Or rather, did affright. And as she fled, her mantle she did fall. Which lion vile with bloody mouth did stain. Anon comes Pyramus, sweet youth and tall, and finds his trusty Thisbe's mantle slain, whereat with bloody blameful blade, he bravely broached his boiling bloody breast. Sword. I told you. Use it, just use it. No, use it as a sword. And Thisbe, tarrying in mulberry shade, his dagger drew and died. Yep. For all the rest, that lion, moonshine, wall, and lovers twain at large discourse, while here they do remain.
So you see that in all respects the play doesn't look like a tragedy. The actors stumble, they mispronounce words and lines, they are ready to converse directly with the audience, and it's a playwright's nightmare. The tragedy turns into comedy. But the courtly audience is socially superior to the actors, but they are a little more sophisticated about what makes a play work. The Duke doesn't understand that though this play may be the silliest stuff he ever heard, it is within the power of the audience to improve it. For the best of actors are but shadows, and the worst are no worse if imagination amend them. But the nobles in the audience have little of the necessary audience imagination. They mock the actors, they talk loudly among themselves during the performance. They are as literally minded in their own way as the actors, and as if unaware that they too are actors sitting on a stage. They laugh at what unrealistic and trivial things all plays and players are. And one more play, we will look at Hamlet. In Hamlet, Shakespeare offers his most detailed image of theatrical performance. Here, a professional repertory troupe, similar to Shakespeare's own company, comes to Elsinore to perform before the Danish court. The play that takes place within Hamlet is referenced as the Murder of Gonzago. In a way, the Murder of Gonzago is used as an allusion to the reasons why the events in Hamlet are taking place. It is a flashback to something that wasn't shown in Hamlet, but directly affects the plot. Hamlet stages this play himself so that we may see how Claudius comes to power and takes his deceased brother's wife as his own. On the other hand, the inclusion of the Murder of Gonzago was mainly intended by Hamlet to get Claudius to confess of his crime. Which was poisoning and subsequent murder of Claudius's own brother. Even though Claudius makes no public confession, Hamlet can tell that he is distressed about the actions depicted in the mock play and feels that now he can take his father's ghost's words as the truth. Even though Hamlet doesn't obtain a public admission of guilt by his uncle, the reaction that his uncle has towards the production is enough to spur Hamlet to seek revenge for his father's death, as that is the main goal that drives Hamlet throughout the rest of the play. So this was the main proof for him of Claudius's fault. So, but let's look at the actors and the play. So, once arrived at the Danish palace, the players are servants, and their low social status determines their treatment by the king's counselor, Polonius. But Hamlet, a person of the new age, he greets them warmly. You are welcome, masters. Welcome all. Well, let me have a look. Welcome all. I am glad to see thee well. Welcome, good friends. So Hamlet thinks of himself as one of these actors. He thinks of them as if they were equal. He jokes familiarly with the boy who plays female parts about his voice deepening. He jokes about other young players and says, "Oh, old friend, why thy face is valanced since I saw thee last? Comest thou to beard me in Denmark?" So the boy will soon lose the opportunity to play female parts. Hamlet is a theater buff, like one of the young lords who sat in the gallery boxes above the stage in London theaters and commented loudly and wittingly on the action. Like them too, he knows the latest neoclassical aesthetic standards and looks down on what he considered the crudity of the popular theater. Its ranting tragedians, melodramatic acting styles, parts to tear a cat in, and so on. The prince has elevated views on acting, and he says, "Suit the action to the word to the action, overstep not the modesty of nature, well digested in the scenes, set down with as much modesty as cunning. And let those that play your clowns speak no more than is set down for them." So, be close to nature, be close to natural acting. And we will have a look at another video now where you will see these instructions given by Hamlet to the actors. And again, pay attention to the surroundings, to the structure of the theater. And interestingly, a woman, Michelle Terry, is playing Hamlet in this version. Well, video.
Go.
Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it, as many of your players do, I'd as lief the town crier spoke my lines. Nor do not saw the air too much with your hand thus, but use all gently, or it offends me to the soul to hear a robustious periwig-pated fellow tear a passion to tatters.
I warrant, Your Honour.
Be not too tame, neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance, that you overstep not the modesty of nature. For anything so overdone is from the purpose of playing, whose end, both at the first and now, was and is to hold as 'twere the mirror up to nature. Oh, there be players that I have seen play and heard others praise. They imitated humanity so abominably.
I hope we have reformed that indifferently with us, sir.
Oh, reform it altogether. Go make you ready. What a hurry!
But the players fail to follow Hamlet's neoclassical standards in both their acting style and in their play. And The Murder of Gonzago is an old-fashioned rhetorical tragedy structured like a morality play, beginning with a dumb show and filled with stiff, formal speeches. But the play does hold as though were the mirror up to nature, to show virtue her feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time his form and pressure. The Murder of Gonzago, for all its artistic crudity, reveals the hidden disease of Denmark, the murder of the old king by his brother. When Hamlet confides in the audience, "I've never heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play have by the very cunning of the scene been struck so to the soul and spur his own dull revenge," so these words illustrates theater's power to reveal truth through pretend. Shakespeare's regular deployment of theater techniques and creation of characters rich with theatrical knowledge calls attention to the tricks of his trade. But rather than alienating the audience, it invites them in making them co-conspirators with the characters in the play, by treating them as knowledgeable colleagues, alert to their role in the telling of the play. So, to look at the Elizabethan theater through Shakespeare's internal plays is to, as Polonius advises, by indirections find directions out. Seldom to be taken straight, these internal plays nonetheless reveal the aspects of presentation that regularly attracted Shakespeare's attention. His own professional actors were probably not as crude as Nick Bottom, amateur players, nor were his plays by any means so old-fashioned as The Murder of Gonzago. But as he portrays his players, his stage, his audience, ironically, he always returns to the same performance issues. Do the players perform badly? How realistic is the stage setting? Does the audience hear and see the play in the right imaginative spirit? And does it move them towards some kind of moral reformation? Is the play put together in an effective manner? Sometimes the poet apologizes for the necessity of illusion on his bare stage. Sometimes he laughs at extreme realism. Sometimes he laments the transience of theatrical illusion. And sometimes he mocks his audience for failing to enter into the artificial reality of the stage. But all his oblique comments on performance in his theater show a relatively crude and limited performance on the actual stage, contrasted with the powers of imagination in the playwright's words and the audience's reception, to create understanding and moral regeneration through illusion. So Shakespeare's plays, though don't need any special setting on the most part, so imagination was his greatest weapon. And to conclude my lecture today, I would give you some recommendations. First of all, I want to urge you to read Shakespeare's works, his poems, his sonnets, his plays in the original or in translation, which is more convenient for you. Anyway, it will be good. So I would recommend you to search the website of Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, and I'm sure you will discover many new interesting details about his life and his works. And of course, there is a very good project, online project, Globe on Screen, so where you can watch and enjoy performances of the modern Globe, and we have seen some scenes from these performances. So never cease reading, and reading Shakespeare in particular. Thank you for your attention. and reading Shakespeare in particular. Thank you for your attention.